Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to the second day of a fusion of virtual and physical education, engagement, and practice through digital immersive experiences. This short course has been curated by Factum Foundation. This is Costanza Blaskovic speaking, and well, again, welcome all. I see that some people is still joining, and well, yeah, it's fine. People will add up. Yesterday, we saw the amazing results in both recording and disseminating the heritage, cultural heritage, scientific heritage. In particular, we saw objects or, well, specimens that appears very difficult to analyze and appreciate with the naked eye. For example, small insect specimens in the context of natural history museums. On the other hand, we also explored sites that no longer exist or have been strongly modified by the passing of time and conflict. So in both cases, we explored very challenging routes. Today, we will concentrate on the links between the creative industries and cultural engagement. We will see two examples of multi-sector collaboration between cultural and education institutions, collaborating, of course, within industries devoted to edutainment, in particular with Ubisoft for the creation of the video games of the Assassin's Creed saga. I'm very happy to welcome Claire Anderson, Director of the Digital Lab for Islamic Visual Culture at Edinburgh University, and her colleagues Denise Rural and Sarah Slingler, who are going to introduce us their work at the Digital Lab. They collaborated with Ubisoft for the release of Assassin's Creed Mirage, set in Baghdad, and more in general, their work across video games and entertainment and education, providing accurate information about the art, architecture, and cultural heritage of Middle Eastern and global Islamic civilization. Please, the floor is yours. I don't want to take time to your presentation. Welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, Costanza. I'll share my screen now. Oh.
In the meantime, I remember to people attending that the chat, you can use the Zoom chat to ask questions. And well, you can also raise your hand if you want to interact directly. And at the end of the two sessions, because we will have this first session and second one, as you know very well from the program, I will read the questions and revert it to the speakers. Thank you.
Okay. Can I check that you can see our images?
Yes.
Very good.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you very much, Costanza, for the kind invitation to participate in this seminar. I've admired the work of Factum Foundation for many years and had the pleasure of visiting them in Madrid last year. So it's really wonderful to be able to share my work today in the AOA and Archive Online Academy. Okay. So video games have emerged as one of the most significant ways in which the public engages with the past. Many scholars have argued for the educational value of games in making knowledge accessible and informing public perceptions of the past, including architecture. And as you see, this article was from The Atlantic, published in 2022. So it's been a few years now. Today, I'd like to share my long-standing experiments in using video games as a medium, focusing in this talk on their use for public education and impact. And as Costanza mentioned, I'm joined by Denise Voral, who is the GLAM lead in the Digital Lab. GLAM, an acronym for Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. and Dr. Sarah Slingluff, who is the education lead for the Digital Lab. And we're going to be speaking specifically about our consultancy and research collaboration with video game publisher Ubisoft. We'll be sharing our work as external historians and art historians on their popular history-themed video game Assassin's Creed Mirage and its educational codex feature, The History of Baghdad. Set in 9th century Baghdad, the game's virtual environment offers, I think, and I hope you'll agree, a successful example of how video games can use digital visualization to make Islamic art, architecture, and cultural heritage widely accessible. And if we have time, we can also show you some of our research internal to the Digital Lab using game engines to visualize architecture and cultural heritage of Cordoba in present-day Spain, which was the medieval capital, as you probably know, of Al-Andalus, or Islamic Iberia, until the 11th century. So that work represented here by the original Digital Munya project, which I started around 2010, and also by Digital Munya 2 and the Cordoba Journey. As we hope to show, video games are a powerful medium to help wide public audiences imagine and appreciate tangible cultural heritage, so art, architecture, material culture, visual culture, and perhaps especially when the physical objects and buildings no longer exist, or when, for whatever reason, they can't be visited, viewed, and experienced in real life. So one of the few, and arguably the best-known video game to depict medieval Islamic historical architecture was Assassin's Creed. So it was released by the video game publisher Ubisoft in 2007. Set in Damascus and other cities in the medieval Islamic lands, this game launched what is now one of the most successful and widely recognized video game franchises, combining inspiration from places and times ranging from Damascus and other Middle Eastern cities in the period of the Crusades, to ancient Greece and Egypt more recently, to Renaissance Italy, to Viking Age Britain, Victorian London, just to name a few of the historical settings it has combined with its signature science fiction and fantasy themes. So we worked with them on Assassin's Creed Mirage, and I'm showing you the trailer image, which was released in 2023. And as Costanza mentioned, the narrative for the game is set in 9th century Baghdad. So working alongside me were Sarah Slingluff and Denise Vural, as I mentioned, and also Dara Etefagi, our Unity developer in the Digital Lab. At the time, they were graduate students at the University of Edinburgh, working with me in the Digital Lab, and had been since our work on Digital Munya 2. And they brought their training and expertise across Islamic art, history, education, and game development to the Ubisoft project. So one thing that it's important to say, I think, and to make clear at the outset, is that in creating the Assassin's Creed Mirage game world, Ubisoft's world design teams faced an extreme challenge in visualizing the game's built environment. And this, of course, is due to the lack of surviving tangible remains from 9th century Baghdad. So I'm showing you some well-known Abbasid remains, including standing remains here from the 9th century, but as you know, they're quite fragmented. So since the Assassin's Creed franchise is best known for the time and attention to historical authenticity in representing architecture and urban environments, representing 9th century Baghdad was, to put it mildly, a steep order. But I think it was a very important and laudable project in terms of educating wide public audiences about medieval Islamic art, architecture, and history. And this is where I, as a historian of medieval Islamic architecture, especially for the 9th and 10th centuries, was able to help their creative teams understand architecture and urbanism in the period in which the game's story is set. So this is perhaps a familiar image that I'm showing to you. This is the plan of the round city of Baghdad that I and my colleagues in the field of Islamic art, history, and architecture normally use when we're teaching Abbasid Baghdad and trying to show students what the round city of Baghdad was like in the 9th century. As you can see, it's very limited in what it or what it can convey about the urban environment and about tangible cultural heritage and life in a medieval Islamic city. So this is what Ubisoft's teams, with our help and the help of the other external Islamic historians, ultimately created as a way of visualizing Baghdad for the game. What they created was a game world and a city that does indeed feel believable, that's full of life and human activity and the stories that make architecture and urban spaces come to life. And though it was widely publicized, you may have seen some of the publicity around this, that Baghdad, as imagined in this game, is so historically accurate that it made a historian cry. It would be important to note that it is not, in fact, strictly historically accurate, at least not in the way that scholars and historians of Islamic art and architecture and urbanism understand the term. Baghdad, as presented in Assassin's Creed Mirage, is quite breathtaking. It's also completely fantastical. This is a Baghdad that never was. It actually evokes, this game world, evokes a plethora of other times and places beyond Baghdad and the Caliphal age. As they walk through the round city, players may encounter elements reminiscent of other times and places, medieval North African gates and fountains, early modern Iranian bazaars and mosques, domed tombs from South and Central Asia, for instance, alongside very tangible, visible evocations of Caliphal art and architecture as well. So when I look at this, I have two different reactions depending on what perspective I'm thinking through at the time. So when I look at individual architectural elements, sometimes these can strike me as a bit jarring because as a historian of Islamic architecture, I can see that many of them are from other times and places. They're not from the 9th century. But are actually important references to Islamic architecture, as I said, of other regions, other time places, other traditions apart from 9th century Baghdad. So even as what they have done is visually spectacular, it is important in terms of thinking about visuality and a critical understanding of what we are seeing in these images to note that it is not strictly historically accurate to the 9th century. At the same time, though, I think that what they've done has a significance that goes beyond simply trying to replicate a strict archaeological historical accuracy. And the importance and the significance of that, in my opinion, is that this is a video game that's going to bring what may be an unfamiliar artistic tradition and global history to many players around the globe, millions, in fact. And in a way, what Ubisoft has created here is an homage to the entire expanse of Islamic architecture. So if I don't look at it from a strictly scholarly perspective, I think that is extremely exciting and very commendable. There are lots of reasons, of course, why people don't know the architecture of Islamic civilization, survival of evidence being one of the most important reasons. And of course, you can't think about that without thinking about broader histories of imperialism, colonialism, and warfare. Obviously, it's much harder for people to connect with history when they don't have tangible remains, architecture that still stands, for example, and when art and architecture of Islamic civilization is not generally included in academic curricula. So for me, the video game as a medium makes it possible for people to understand in a very tangible way what we've lost. And this is so very important for public impact as a way of introducing people to unfamiliar histories, unfamiliar cultural heritage. So in addition to the architecture and the urban environment that you can explore in the game world, there's also an educational feature that we designed with Ubisoft's in-house historian, Raphael Wieland, to be part of the game. And this is an in-game codex, The History of Baghdad, which is to all purposes an actually quite traditional museum exhibition. But it's a museum exhibition that's been built into the game with written entries like museum labels, and that is illustrated by period monuments, objects, and manuscripts. So I'd like to show you how the codex feature works within the game and just point out that the game's visualizations offer the players a chance to imagine and experience architectural interiors with furnishings and period objects. So what I wanted to point out here is that the game's visualizations offer players a chance to imagine and experience architectural interiors with furnishings and objects. And so while we can certainly critique the aspects of these interiors as scholars, such visualization of these architectural interiors is in itself, I think, an important contribution to experiencing the histories of Islamic art and architecture in an embodied way, because normally we experience objects, textiles, furnishings in the space of a museum in glass vitrines and completely decontextualized from their architectural surroundings. So, as historians, we probably would have conceptualized Baghdad in a way that's closer to the archaeological evidence that we have for 9th century Iraq. And that approach is what you see here in some of the concept art for the game. So that means that people who don't play the game, if they see some of this concept art, they may still see some accurate historical representation of period architecture. So in this case, of course, the famous 9th century Great Mosque of Samarra with its distinctive spiral minaret. All right, so there are many examples of tangible cultural heritage that have been visualized in the game's environment, but this is one of my favorites. It's a tiny detail that you could easily overlook, but if you're familiar with Baghdad and with the traditional watercraft of Iraq, this would probably stand out as a small detail that really speaks to the cultural heritage of the place. And that is these round watercraft that you see here in the game. So we were able to connect the development teams at Ubisoft with the Iraqi Cultural Heritage Group, the Safina projects, who study and preserve Iraq's boats and maritime heritage. And the Safina projects works on these traditional round coracles, or guffa, inspired Ubisoft's artists to visualize and reinterpret these traditional Iraqi boats, adding a unique and authentic detail to the environment. So finally, one outcome of the game was a museum exhibition at the Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris, which closed earlier this year. And that used Assassin's Creed Mirage as the inspiration to create a new public experience focusing on the history of Baghdad in the Abbasid period. So my hope is that this video game created opportunities for new audiences and wider audiences, non-gamers and gamers alike, to learn about the art, architecture, and history of medieval Baghdad and Islamic civilization. So now I'm going to turn it over to Denise, and she can tell you a bit more from the GLAM side.
Hello, everyone. So before we delve further into our work in Assassin's Creed specifically, I want to give an overview of the video game landscape and the place of Islamic cultures within it, which hopefully will explain further why we believed our involvement in video game production was a necessary intervention. If we can move to the next slide. So the representation of Islamic and or Middle Eastern cultures in video games are rare, but it's not non-existent. There has been more and more games produced that represent the cultures. But even games that are marketed and widely perceived as culturally or historically accurate often perpetuate Orientalist and sometimes blatantly Islamophobic narratives. And a crucial reason for that is because most often games that feature the region are created without the participation of local peoples and the participation of experts in Islamic art or history. You can see the most lucrative gaming companies, I believe this was 2023, and none of those companies are based in an Islamic country. And recently, the video game market has diversified, and there are more and more developers from the regions and from an Islamic background that are working on video game production. But this does not automatically mean that when someone from a Muslim heritage is involved in a video game, that the game produced would be free of all Orientalist stereotypes. And this is because the internalization of Orientalist narratives, a case of self-Orientalizing, is still prevalent and can lead to the manifestation of harmful stereotypes and inaccuracies in the works of developers from the region too. And this is why it's very important to involve academic experts in production. And to have a brief overview of the representation of Islamic cultures in video games, I will be talking about three main genres, so strategy, shooter, and action adventure. If we move on to strategy, so historic Islamic civilizations are actually have been a big part of some of the most popular and genre-defining franchises of strategy games, including Age of Empires and Sid Meier's Civilization, which I'm sure most of you have heard of and played. And here you can see Harun al-Rashid as depicted in Civilization 5. And strategy games often allow the player to play as a civilization of their choosing, which are based on real historical ones. And the gameplay will often span centuries, during which the player will try to advance their civilization. And many scholars in the game studies and historical game studies field have pointed out that these games do have a massive educational potential, and they often feature historically meaningful gameplay. But the game genre has also received quite a lot of criticism on the portrayal of Muslim civilization. If we move on to civilization specifically, we can get to the thank you. So two Islamic civilizations are included in the series, the Arabians and Persians, which of course are a combination of various different dynasties. They are not anything specific historical society or dynasty. Here you can see a depiction of the Persian capital of the Persian society in Civilization 6. And as you can see from the artistic depiction, similarly to how the societies in general are depicted in the game, the artistic depiction is also a combination of many cultures and many historical periods. And in addition to that, with also pure Orientalist fantasies that are not based on any real cultures. And moreover, the Arabian society in the game are defined more by their religion and then in more so by their in-game Christian counterparts, which actually is a very common othering idea that Muslims have always been driven more by religion than other groups. And the Persian civilization are represented as ruled by a totalitarian emperor, which perpetuates the dated stereotype of the despotic Oriental ruler. And they're also depicted as focused on gold, which plays into the stereotype of decadence. So there are some issues with games in this genre, but they have also been praised a lot too. And moving on to shooter games, which is when you play as a character that fights against the enemy, and you often control and use a variety of weapons, often guns. And this genre has really produced some of the most problematic representations of Muslims in video games. And they've also produced the most lucrative representations. There has been, I think, most often in this genre where you can see a Muslim character. But unfortunately, these characters have often been represented as the enemy, and specifically the Middle Eastern terrorist. And also the in-game environments that depict Muslim countries have often shown the countries as war-torn and hostile and barren, which you can see here. This is from Call of Duty, which is perhaps one of the most famous shooter series. And in Call of Duty, there is an arc where the main antagonist is a fictional terrorist organization with the Arabic name Al-Qatala, which means the killers. And another main antagonist is a Saudi Arabian warlord who leads an anti-Western movement. And as you can see, the buildings here are destroyed with crumbling and half-finished buildings, dust and mud everywhere, and you can notice some Arabic writing on the walls as well. And the rise of this genre with the Muslim terrorist stereotype must be situated especially within the rise of Islamophobic propaganda within Western popular media in general after the 9/11 attacks and the subsequent war on terror. Moving on to the final genre I want to talk about, which is action adventure games, which is also the genre of Assassin's Creed. And this genre revolves around exploration and action, which might include fighting, and will feature a narrative which plays a key part. And in many cases, it also features fantasy or science fiction elements, which are both the case for Assassin's Creed. And the first game in this genre to have featured elements from Islamic cultures is Prince of Persia, which was released in 1989 and has been the first game in an ongoing series. And the Prince of Persia games are partially inspired by 1001 Nights, and they are set in a fantastical Persian-inspired world that combines elements from pre-Islamic and Islamic Persianate cultures, as well as other cultures and fantasies again. And the plot of the first three games follows the prince who is trying to rescue the sultan's daughter. And in the first games, this is from an evil vizier named Jafar. And in the third game, from the sultan himself. And overall, the narrative of Prince of Persia is really a quintessential Orientalist tale told in the video game format with evil, despotic Islamic rulers and sexualized women. And you can see here up one of the covers of the games in its early releases, which really shows the sexualization of the women and her helplessness. And interestingly, the Prince of Persia franchise was bought by Ubisoft in 2001, which is a producer of Assassin's Creed as well. And Assassin's Creed was actually going to be a game in the Prince of Persia franchise. In its initial phases, this is how it was planned, but it ultimately became its own separate series. If we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So Prince of Persia draws on Islamic cultures and literature, and it is set in an entirely fictional and fantastical land, and it makes no claims of historical accuracy or authenticity. But in contrast, Assassin's Creed consists of 13 games set in all different specific geographical regions, as Claire mentioned, and they mention specific real-life locations and feature real-life historical figures. They might not be reflected in the most accurate way, but they are based on real figures and real places. And Assassin's Creed is really set apart from Prince of Persia as well as other games by its perception by players as historically authentic. This is really just a narrative that many players of Assassin's Creed share, that they play Assassin's Creed because they like history and they want to learn more. And also, it is widely acknowledged by its producers that they want to respect the cultures and regions they represent and that they take history seriously. And this is why we were involved in this as well. I don't want to give more information about Assassin's Creed's narrative, as I'm sure you're either familiar with it or I don't want to spoil it if you're not. But I will note that compared to the Muslim terrorist trope, which is so prevalent in Western video games that I mentioned, and popular media in general of this period, which is really exemplified by Call of Duty. Assassin's Creed's first game, which was set in the Middle East, was released in the same year as the Call of Duty that was set in the Middle East, and the depictions were very, very different. In Assassin's Creed, you played as a Muslim character. You encountered Muslim characters, and they were not your enemies, they were just people. So this is why it was really important that this was the series we worked with. And going to my role in Assassin's Creed and Mirage specifically, this was mostly finding objects from collections of Islamic art or photographs of architectural remains that we used to illuminate the history of Baghdad Codex, which you can see an example here with the writing and also the item I have chosen. So in addition to providing historical information, the objects we chose also act as tools to correct Orientalist narratives that are so common in video games. We often only had one object to illustrate highly complex matters covered in the codex, so we had to choose really carefully. And a core narrative we wanted to fight with this game and the information we give was the overtly sexual and powerless Oriental woman stereotype, which is really well exemplified by the Sultan's daughter in Prince of Persia. So this is an entry on the Kian, or the singing girls of the Caliphate, who were highly trained and skilled professionals. They were musicians, dancers, songwriters, and they really had a very professional role, and they had a prominent role in the caliph's court. They were respected as professionals. They also often taught. So the object we chose to represent them was the flute, which is a 9th century flute from a house in the Metropolitan Museum, which really highlighted their professional identity. And if we move on to the next slide, another example where we wanted to fight against the stereotype of the Oriental woman as weak and powerless was the codex entry on the caliph's mother, or the Walad. And mothers of caliphs were key and active figures in the Abbasid Caliphate who often held great political power. And an object that encapsulated the power held by these women was a coin of the Walad al Khayzuran in the David collection in Copenhagen. And this is a coin that actually bears her name and was created in a mint built by her. So at first glance, it might not seem like a declaration of power, but it was a very direct and open declaration of the ruling power held by her, who was in fact the de facto ruler of the caliphate when this coin was minted. So that's it for now. I'll just hand it over to Sarah. Thank you.
Great. I will go pretty quickly, I think, through some of the challenges that we faced, but happy to talk more about this afterwards. But I really just wanted to emphasize that not only are we interested in the digital lab and providing materials that educate public, so Assassin's Creed has had over 200 million players throughout its sort of long span, but also giving people tools to do this work themselves because more of us need to be doing this work. So the first challenge that we face, if Blair, you can click, is the idea of accuracy versus authenticity, which both Blair and Denise have mentioned. And there is substantial scholarship on this issue. And really what this means is that there is a different expectation, as Blair talked about, that players have versus historians have. And while for us historians, it might be the number one thing to make sure that we have accurate material, what research has found is that players in history games have this high expectation for fact, but their previous education and experience will lead them to expect different things of what is fact. So even if you create a highly historically accurate game, it might not actually resound with the audience because there is not this idea that it is authentic when a player plays it. And so this really was the first sort of challenge that we wanted to highlight. Both Blair and Denise have spoken about it. These Orientalist tropes and the history of Orientalist tropes in video games means that if you are trying to make a video game, you have to deal with it. You can't just sort of jump into what is accurate and what you know to be true, because you sort of have to meet the player in the middle. So it is slowly introducing and shifting a narrative from sort of Orientalist tropes to more accurate information, but it can't really happen overnight. The second challenge, sort of with accuracy and authenticity, so another prong of that, and is this idea that when you're creating an immersive world, it is almost impossible to be accurate. And so we have this nice quote here from David Frederick, who wrote this in his article, Time Delta Time, which was about him experimenting with reconstructing Pompeii in 3D games, that almost every step towards an immersive presence was a step away from the real evidence. And really what I just want to share here is that I actually have some experience. I have worked in central Spain with Dionisio Urbino and Catalina Urquijo about some of the archaeological work in Zorita Castle. And it is a very different experience when you start trying to figure out, well, wait, what did the ceiling look like? What did the floor look like? Because archaeological evidence is by in its nature incomplete. And so when you make these immersive experiences and these immersive worlds, you have to make choices that will be inaccurate, and you have to be okay with it, right? You can say this is our best guess. Other things that we have actually come across a lot is archaeological. We learn a lot from sort of middens, right? Trash heaps and sewage. But is that really what a player of a video game wants to see, right? An accurate sewage system might not be high on the list. The third challenge, and I'll move to the next one, is the idea that game assets to make accurate worlds don't exist for the Islamic world in many, many cases. So what we've shown here, this is a model of a basin at Arumania, which we might be able to share a little bit about later. This was made by an intern for the Digital Lab, Dallin Evans, and it's a beautiful hand-drawn reconstruction, 3D reconstruction of this basin. But the reality is making this takes a lot of time. And video games don't have a lot of time. So one way that perhaps a lot of people in the audience today can contribute to sort of making more accurate environments is by modeling these any type of culture that's not well represented in a video game. When we make these models and we make them available, all of a sudden that is in the tool set that game developers can use. So when we don't have accurate sort of pieces, you end up with what I'm going to show on this next slide, which both Claire and Denise have referred to, is we get these fantastical worlds that sort of give historians heart attacks when you look at it, because as Claire pointed out, in your historian hat, something doesn't compute. You've got Saudi Arabia sitting next to the medieval Levant, right? So Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine, next to South Asia. And while a player playing this might not recognize this, they are deeply ahistorical environments in some ways. And this has nothing to do with maybe a desire to be, everybody wants to be accurate, but if you don't have the pieces on a very technical level to be accurate, you can't make accurate environments. So this is, I think, where this audience can really help with an intervention. The last challenge I'll highlight, I know we're running out of time, so I'll go quickly, but access to collections was really difficult for us because in many situations we had really great ideas of things that we wanted to include in a codex, but there was some sort of challenge. So one challenge can be international relations. This was really unexpected for us as maybe academics. The idea that the situation between Russia and the Ukraine, which really disrupted the Ubisoft studios in Kyiv, meant that there was a real uncomfortability with working with some collections that have the best examples of Sogdian art, right? And so that sort of international relations can affect the work you do. And then the other two really have to do with the Western heritage of the museum field, which has meant that a lot of times collections have either been removed from their home country, but also in that process that there are non-Western collections, very rich collections, but because they haven't had the investment that Western museums have had, they are unable to provide online access or to scan artifacts that could be used. And again, something that this audience might really be able to help with. Anytime we help non-Western collections get online so that their collections can be shared, it makes it a little bit easier to do the work that we are doing. Finally, I just want to go with a plug. As Blair said at the beginning, I am a teacher. So if you want to click to the last slide I have, I just put up Bloom's Taxonomy of Knowledge, which is probably familiar to anybody who has worked in education or studied pedagogy. But this idea that not only is making a video game great to sort of engage a public, but also it's a really, really valuable educational experience for the team itself. And that is something that I think, if we have time, Claire can share about a little bit later. But I think as a digital lab, we've really come to embrace the idea that when you bring students on board, and when you're actually asking them not just to remember or understand or apply material, but get into those upper levels, analyze what's important, evaluate and select and support something that should go into a final creation, that we're actually creating much more sticky memories, that we are being better educators, not only for our public, but also for our students. And that's maybe where I'll end it off because I think that's us out of time.
Thank you very much. Well, if you want to add something, of course, feel free. And also, in the meantime, we wait for the questions from participants in chat or raising your hands. So yeah, let's say if you wanna add something, as you were mentioning, please feel free to do it.
I think Blair has a couple slides of some of the work that we've done internally as a team, not Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed is the fun big one, but we've had a lot of fun experimenting with games on our own, and Blair might chat about that.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I can just say that yeah, if you're interested to learn more about Digital Munya 2, which is, this long-standing research project that I've had focused on the Almunyas or the Munyas of Umayyad Cordoba, then this was my first foray into working with game engines for historical visualization. And so I invite you to go to our website where you can download our playable Unity immersive experience that introduces you to a site that's inspired by Arumania and that brings together texts and objects. So you can see some of that gameplay on YouTube through the website. The second game is the Cordoba Journey, which we co-created with a wonderful student team of video game developers at Abertay University here in Scotland. And this game took the same idea, which was trying to introduce students, but in this case, students of all ages, from younger players up to university age and adults, to Cordoba in the Umayyad period and to try to help them understand what these sites were. And likewise, there is gameplay videos on our website that are linked to the YouTube and also to the game that you can download.
Great. Well, I have questions. I see there is a question in the chat. More than one. Okay, so I let people type maybe for now. Just talking, just since you now concluded with Munia and the Cordoba game, and how about the balance of accuracy and authenticity in this game, since you maybe took all the well, all steps for the creation more closely compared to Assassin's Creed?
Right. So, how did we balance accuracy and authenticity?
Yeah.
Well, in Digital Munya too, because it was not a commercial product. It was an academic research experiment, basically. We were able to, at least in terms of the evidence that we brought together in the game, we brought Arabic text that was translated from the Chronicle of Ibn Hayyan, who is the 11th century court chronicler for the court of an Umayyad. So we were able to bring a primary source text document, and what we did was to compile the passages from Ibn Hayyan's Arabic text that referred to this villa, Arumania, and its patron, a famous Slav eunuch in the court, Duri Asarir. We brought all of those Arabic passages together, and so a player in the game will encounter those passages that refer to Arumania or to Duri Asarir as the patron, and also they'll be able to encounter representations of actual carved ivories from Cordoba that were created under that patron's supervision. So in a way, we were able to be there. There's no story or anything like that. It's just bringing together medieval Arabic text and actual artifacts and presenting those to a player in the immersive experience of this space that is inspired by an actual villa site, Arumania.
I might add, it's not a reconstruction, and we're very careful when we talk about it to say that because, yes, we guessed sometimes. And even the idea that all of these objects and all of these primary sources are together in one spot is ahistorical in a sense. But, right, so Ibn Hayyan writes 100 years after Romania. So, there is this anachronistic element. I think you have to come to a comfort level that I think is something as a team we really learned from Ubisoft. I know I'm speaking for Claire and Denise here, but there is it does practice your flexibility as a historian working in this way, which I think is good.
Compromises are necessary in any possible field. Thank you for your answer. And since before Denise mentioned the singing girls codex feature, and you said that it has been difficult because you had to choose maybe one object in that case. And who is choosing the object? What's the role of the historian, of the scientific, the person in charge of deciding? Who is the person in charge of deciding the architectures, the streets, the cities, and the objects to show and maybe focus on?
Well, the creative director for Ubisoft, Jean-Luc Sala, in Bordeaux at their Bordeaux team, the creative director is the one whose creative artistic vision, right, sets the game environment and the choice of architecture and buildings that were displayed, everything that you see in that game world. So basically how we approached our work with Ubisoft was that we had a 9-week training period at the beginning, where me and Sarah and Denise were presenting to the Ubisoft World Design Director, and we were presenting to them around topics like, what does architecture look like in the period? What does urbanism look like? And so forth. So we had a very intensive 9-week session of presenting the historical visual material and textual and other types of evidence to the World Design Director. And through the World Design Director and the Mirage historian, they were then working with the creative director and all of the various teams who then translated the historical information that we provided, translated it into the artistic vision of the creative director. That was for the for the game and the game narrative and all of that. We also advised, we gave advice on characters, quest ideas, and things like this. But I think it's important to emphasize that we brought historical expertise, right? And so we brought the information. But it was we didn't have any control over what was chosen and depicted in the game, or how, we didn't see the game until everybody else saw it when it was released in October of 2023. But in the case of the educational codex, that is where we were able to exercise a lot of choice, not only advising and not only bringing the historical information, but also helping to write the entries, to edit the entries, to choose which objects would appear in collaboration with Mirage's in-game historian. And yeah, Denise and Sarah, I don't know if you want to jump in if I missed anything there.
And that's why Denise said correcting narrative through objects, and that's why you pointed that far out. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, we felt like that's where we could really play an important role, and I think the thing that was very important about our work with Ubisoft on the educational feature is that it wasn't just a one-way transmission of knowledge. It was an iterative process going back and forth with their historians, and it's important to point out that the Mirage historian, Raphael Wayland, has a PhD in Middle Eastern Studies and History, and the world design director from Assassin's Creed, Maxime Durand, is also a historian as well. So across, Ubisoft and across the Digital Lab, we were historians talking to one another and going back and forth, particularly on the educational feature.
Yeah, talking specifically about the objects, how it worked was that I just would find potential ones and we would all discuss which one would work best. And that's something we had the most control over, the text and the objects in the codex. But some objects also made their way into the main game, which we weren't aware of until later, which was a great surprise.
And there is some question.
Yeah, the AI one in the chat, I'm happy to jump in on. I think this was a really timely.
Just read it because maybe later in the recording they cannot read it. So is AI going to change the process for creating historical accurate scenes? Sorry.
Yes, so I would say this is actually something that we grappled with as a team in our latest Digital Munya 3, which is a fun little, we had a team of students that came together, and we were very lucky to have a student who was sort of under the guise of the history team. Her name's Paige Cooper, and she's really interested in intellectual property law, AI, and sort of where this was. And as a lab, we really had to grapple with it. I mean, the short answer is yes. Obviously, AI is coming, and it will change things. The biggest challenge with AI is that it can only generate knowledge from things that already exist. So we're actually back to the problem of if a tool set doesn't exist for Islamic cultures, there's no way AI can generate a historically accurate environment, which is great news for scholars because there's a need for us, right? So eventually AI will change that. We're a few years away from that because we just have so much sort of catching up to do. As a digital lab, though, we really have we have an AI sort of ethical guidance statement. There are a lot of moral and ethical issues with AI that we want to be cognizant with. I'm sure our mission will change, but where we are right now is that while we are happy to use AI in sort of a research mode, right? And so students are welcome to use AI to sort of organize their thoughts. Nothing we generate is AI generated, right? And that has a lot to do with sort of the ethical issues of image rights of people and so how sort of the first AI models were trained. And there is, I think it would be really interesting to see academia and academics think about training their own AI models, right? That I think would give us a little bit more control over the moral and ethical issues over AI versus sort of using AI engines that have been trained in sort of deeply unethical ways. So I think this is a really good moment for us all to be talking about this. But sort of the short answer is absolutely, it will change. But hopefully, as academics, we can think about that in a morally, ethically, academically responsible way and how we contribute to that scene.
Short answer is the Digital Lab is not using generative AI for its work. We prefer a human-centered approach that focuses on expertise and research.
I go to another question. Would you be able to speak more about the player's experience playing and maybe learning from Mirage, and how their feedback inform your work as it's developed, and or how this feedback might inform your future projects? And also, well, it's a different question later.
Well, the feedback that I've seen and that I've received from players has been really wonderful. I think one of the most moving things I've seen are players of Muslim heritage or Iraqi heritage who have told me that how moved they were to see Iraq and to see Baghdad represented in a way in the way that it is represented in Mirage as a beautiful, vibrant place filled with life rather than the desolate, war-torn, stereotypes, and how important that has been and how moving for them personally. I've had game developers who are players who are Iraqi or Muslim heritage tell me that they've brought the game to their parents and their grandparents because they're so excited for them to see and share something that they can, that they feel like they can present with pride and with joy. And I think that's, yeah, to me, that's very moving. I love the idea of, being able to bring history into video games and having it be something that families can find a common point of enjoyment to bond together with. So I think for me, as a parent who plays video games and who has a child and nieces and nephews who play and enjoy video games and parents, I think about that, and it informs the work that I do and the way that I approach trying to bring education into video games to make them as good as I can from a point of education and enjoyment.
And if I can add something to that, I think the feedback we've received on Mirage specifically has been there have been two types of feedback, one from people from the region feeling represented, and thinking, because this is a game that's very different to how Muslims are represented often, which I've discussed. And also, we've also received feedback or seen feedback from people who just were very excited and happy to learn about something they didn't really know anything about. And I had a personal experience with that, with one of my friends coming up to me saying that he has read every single codex entry and now knows a lot more than he ever did about Abbasid Baghdad, and he didn't even know what Baghdad was and where it was previously. So I think there are good ways of looking at it from both ways, and I think this experience has reinforced for us all that this is a very valid medium to educate people and to represent people.
That's exciting, and it's exactly what we wanted to explore. And connected to this, your experience working with Ubisoft shaped maybe some area of your research. So perhaps the topics that you're interested in pursuing, or the formats in which you present or publish your future work, not necessarily video games connected, but did they get influenced?
Well, for me, absolutely. I mean, as I said, I had started working with video games back in, 2010, 2011 to support my first book, which was about the Munyas, just because I thought then that it was a great medium to bring together all this kind of architectural and archaeological material, and to be able to give someone a sense of what these vanished archaeological sites were like. So that was an old experiment, but certainly, seeing what Assassin's Creed did around getting players of, such a wide variety of players really interested passionately in history, and especially when they started doing the educational discovery tours that were associated with the latest Assassin's Creed games, where they started actively working with historians and with museum collections and experts. That was something that also really, it really impacted me when I saw it. I got very excited, and that has really stayed with me. That idea that games can be a way to bring education to much, much wider audiences than we have been able to previously do. As, say, in my own case, as a university professor, I say that I've probably taught the art and architecture of the Caliphal period to maybe 3,000 or 4,000 students over the course of a 20-year career. But in one game, Assassin's Creed Mirage, that knowledge that I teach to those 3,000 or 4,000 students in my career went to 5 million players. So the potential to bring information and make it available, I think it has been profoundly influential for me.
I might jump in as the team Luddite. I don't play video games. I don't know anything about video games until I really did this. Honestly, they make me a little dizzy. I feel like I have some, vestibular things going on in my brain. That being said, this absolutely has changed the way I think about teaching. I really am a teacher, right? So research is uh, great and I love it, but I really get very excited for teaching and that opportunity. I came from teaching in West Baltimore, high school boys for a decade. So that's a rough crowd at times to try to be like, history is cool. Um, for me, this process has been really valuable as an educational tool, sort of how I ended the presentation. And I would really encourage people, even if you're terrified of video games, to try and to sort of, there's so many resources out there to work with you on your journey. And I think all of us grow. I think it's a really good challenge for us as academics to grow. right? Because as Claire said, the payoff is so high when you get that 5 million, right? That's really impressive. But also there is a small personal payoff, I think, in keeping flexible and working with your students in the way that they want to engage with historical material.
Thanks. Just a last question concluding. Would you, maybe it's a rhetorical question, would you have appreciated a second or another to give another feedback to the team at Ubisoft to avoid some temporal architectural discrepancies?
I mean, speaking for myself, I've played the game now and gone through the whole thing and experienced it, and I think I'm so impressed by what they created that I'm happy with it. I knew because it was Assassin's Creed that they would create something really spectacular, and I think that yeah, what they've created speaks for itself.
I'll jump in on the timing. The issue actually wasn't that we 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 didn't have the opportunity to contribute to it at an early stage, right? That was actually, so the question in the chat talks about at a later stage, would it have been useful to come back? We sort of came in at a late stage at which they had already developed. And as you can understand, in a studio that has really put substantial sort of investment into a project, it was sort of hard to shift stream midway. So actually from sort of a procedural point of view, it's actually better, it would have been better if we had been involved earlier, because then we would have sort of moved away. So I think from a process standpoint, it is important to involve your experts from the very beginning, right? Is actually what we learned.
That's right. Yeah, all of those, and the process of building a video game from the assets to then, putting everything together, the mechanics, the physics of a video game, there are so many technological complexities involved in that absolutely, I hope that, all video game developers will follow the best practices that are being, advised by the games industry itself, which is to get academic expertise involved at the very, very initial beginning stages when there's still time and ability to make changes.
Thank you one more time for the very interesting presentation and also for the different point of views, making the narration very, very interesting. Now we have to pass to the second session, and which, by the way, has to do a lot with one of the last thing that Sarah was mentioning. So that in many cases there are not models of Islamic architecture or objects already present, for example. So we have to sculpt it from scratch, and that maybe you find it sometimes difficult to collaborate with some collection. You mentioned a very critical, a very particular case where a political war situation was in between, but I understand that sometimes could be a thing that it's maybe difficult to collaborate with collection worldwide. Presenting the second session, well, I must say that we are always talking about a similar topic, but from a slightly different point of view, because we have Álvaro Soler, which is the director of the Royal Armory here in Madrid. So he's the person from the collection that now will explain his point of view. And then there is us, and for us I mean Pactum Foundation, Pactum Arte, in this case with Eduardo Garcia, explaining the part of the digitization of a piece and the 3D modeling. But let me go from the beginning of the brief introduction I wanted to do. Because in August 2024, Factum recorded an iconic Japanese kabuto, a samurai helmet, as you will explain later, which is housed at the Royal Armory in Madrid. As part of a collaboration between Patrimonio Nacional and Ubisoft for the video game Assassin's Creed, in this case Shadow, just launched. Factum carried out the digital restoration and reconstruction to create how the kabuto might have looked when it was given to Felipe II, Philip II. This meticulous reconstruction has not only revived an historical artifact, but it has ensured its accessibility, both physical and digital. The reconstructed kabuto has been on display at the Galleria de las Colecciones Reales in Madrid until a few days ago, April 6th, and now it has joined the collection of the Royal Armory, which will reopen this summer. The digital model of the kabuto has been integrated into the cultural codex of Assassin's Creed Shadows, and players can now explore its history, its significance within the context of the feudal Japan. The research on the historical sources that brought to the reconstruction has been led by the director, Álvaro Soler, scientific leader of the project, and the recording has been conducted by the Factum Artiside by Imran Khan, the digital modeling by Eduardo Garcia, that will explain later all the steps, and the physical reconstruction was led by Silvia Alvarez and her team at Factum Arte. The physical reconstruction of an object that changed so drastically during the years, and the fact that it is exhibited together with the original kabuto now, it's a very interesting process aiming at enriching context and content in museum, with the final goal of making the visit a richer experience, of course, learning. And on the other hand, the model of the kabuto integrated in the video game brings history and art fruition to a much more personal, intimate level, and this helps a lot. And edutainment is exactly this, learning more while enjoying the experience. But I don't want to take time from the presentations, and I welcome very much Álvaro Soler and Eduardo Garcia.
Thank you very much, Constanza. Thank you very much for your invitation to be here today with all of you. Well, as you said, we are going to talk about the process of how we have made a replica from an object which is in a very, very bad condition. This is a special object. It's a samurai helmet, a kabuto, given by the Tenso embassy to Philip II of Spain in 1584. And it is considered as the first attempt of more or less official contact between Japanese and an European kingdom, between Japan and European kingdom. Well, basically, this kabuto was built in three pieces, forming a very pronounced head, to which are attached two earpieces, a mask, and an incomplete set of plates on the neck. Its current appearance today does not correspond to the original, and because it has been altered after his partial destruction by a fire suffered by the collection in 1884. It lost all the decorative treatment and it was reduced to the basic metal structure, as can be seen in this photograph. For this reason, Assassin's Creed Codex was to create a replica that will recover the original appearance of the object. And of course, for this, we should be based in the digital model, the historical inventories for the royal collections, and the 19th century drawings and photograph. The entry of this helmet at the collection was recorded in the inventories from 1594 and 1625. So it means that we have a very, very, very old documents talking about it. No? Thanks to these testimonies, it is possible to approximate to the original appearance. No? Since then, they were kept at the Royal Armory in a state of semi-oblivion consideration but they retain the original appearance. And as we can corroborate, comparing the 16th century inventories and the 19th century images, both drawings and photographs, no? The situation changed completely when as I said, when the Kabuto was destroyed by the fire, no? And we have also to consider that the written sources, they are not always too clear, because we have to think that there were people who lived in Madrid in the 16th century or the 17th century, and they were trying to describe an object they have never seen in their lives, absolutely unknown, because as I told you, there were not contacts between Japan and Europe before that time, no? And that's why in the descriptions they sometimes they said things that are very very strange for us, no? For example, they said that it was covered with a lion, a sea lion fur forming a crest, or that they have two brass horns and that kind of things. No? The descriptions of the materials of the company and the components of the records do not allow us to define exactly the appearance, because all these problems of discussion, as I told you. No? Let's see. Next, please. That's the current state. That's the Royal Armory in the 16th century. This is the 16th century building destroyed by the fire at that time. Next, please. Because that's the fire. Next. And here we are. Well, the fact is that they survived with a few alterations until the 19th century, and this allows us to analyze the appearance thanks to a drawing made by Irison on the left, and the description of this helmet in the book where it was published in 1838, dedicated to the Royal Armoury. Along with this, we have another description before the fire, made in 1899, sorry, 1849, and the catalog of the collection that corresponds also with the photographs taken in 1860, which is the one you have on the right. No? And this has been the three key documents, no, to work with the reconstruction of the Kabuto. No? So the replica has been the result of a complex process based on this historical documentation of the collection. The first step was to create, next please, was to create a digital model using 3,000 photo pictures, and which Eduardo will later describe in much more detail than me. From this, it was printed on iron. Next one, please. To recover exactly the form of the Kabuto. On one hand, if we compare the historical photograph with the current object, we can see that in the current object, we can see some structural elements like the lines and the lacks of some of the treatments lost completely today. No, it even differs in the shape of the eyes, concave in one and convex in the other. All this can be explained by the fact that it was lacquer, and this covered the structural lines and modeled the wrinkles. Lorenz's photograph confirms the loss of the lacquer between the eyes, as you can see in this old picture by Laurent. And, and the second problem was absolutely defining the shade of the red lacquer that covered, according with the inventories, all the helmet. And it is recorded in the Irison's drawings and the inventories. No? Next one, please. As a first exercise, a render was made with a conventional tone to guide us in the initial approximation to its appearance. We studied other red lacquers found in other contemporary or slightly later kabutos, but they weren't entirely solid reference. Next. The defining set of the red treatment was ultimately found in the max of another kabuto. You have you have two masks on the right. The one from the left is the original I'm talking about. It comes from the embassy sent by Hasekura to Tsunenaga to Philip III 30 years later. The max of this kabuto is red on the inside, and it is very well preserved despite the fire suffered by both helmets. Therefore, it was the most precise reference that we could have, and in the absence of another reliable data, we decided to adopt it, matching the color of the replica mask to the inside of the surviving kabuto. No? Next, we address the biggest problem, without any doubt the most complex, which was the type of fur that decorated. Next, Constanta, next, please. In 1849, the kabuto was described as resembling a safe head, lacquered in red on its surface, with two figurative eyes above the forehead and a long crest running to the neck. No, all of these features described in this catalog from the Royal Armory are 1860. In recent drawings differ in the in that the capital crest does not appears to be safe because it has the form of a crest, but rather with a certain volume. Regarding the 16th century inventories, the 1894 catalog notes the presence of bristles of the nape of the neck, consistent with the use of horsehair in some Japanese armor, which would differ from the fuzzy skin appearance attributed in the 16th century. Given the lack of unanimity among these texts, the decision was made to resolve the treatment of the Kabuto's head, without any doubt the most hypothetical aspect of a replica. And trying to imagine how it was, and following according with another Kabutos, the most logical solution is that it should be made with horse hair, although it could be also be made with jack hair, a style in the manner of the traditional Japanese hairstyle. For aesthetical and constructive consistency with the crest of ponytail that top it, following again the side view of the Irison's drawing and the presence of the bristles of animal hair noted in 1849. This treatment this not since incompatible by the frontal view in John Laurent's photographs and the remaining of possible gradient hairs scenes that you can see in the picture. No? Surprisingly, doing so revealed that the supposed crest in Harrison drawing was not such, but an optical effect created by the attached hair itself. No? Another element that caught our attention was the treatment of the hair falling down the neck, as we can see in the pictures. Now, rather than the right straight hair given in the Irison's drawing. The photograph presents braids, which explains by horsehair strength to curl it left and comb. No? After 3 centuries of untreated hair, braids likely form a nape of the neck. No? For me, working on a work on a project like this from a digital modem has given us a great has forced us, much better said, to consider all the process of interpretation and study of the object, no? Because in this way we should never we should never consider other options that we have had thanks to the project working with the legal model, no? But I think that for more technical questions and nothing better than passing to the word to Eduardo.
Thank you. Thank you, Alvaro. I'm gonna share my screen. Thank you again, Alvaro. I take this opportunity to again thank you for the collaboration. Incredibly useful, and the fact is that this object we knew since the beginning that it was basically unique. Uh, when we are approaching the scanning phase of a project, it's also useful to know where we come from, what is the object exactly, and how do we have to treat it. So when it comes to scanning heritage objects, uh, let's say that we have kind of a protocol, no? And ours is treating the data um, with the highest quality possible, and trying to get out of the object the most amount of data possible, no? So we know that we were going to scan an object that is assembled by 3 or even more pieces, but we had to scan it in 2 pieces. So first of all, we have to focus on this approach of treating the object as it is, something that we were not able to do in this case for the care that we have to have for the object. No, so a kabuto is constructed by what they call the shikoro, which are the protectors of the neck, the back part of the head, and usually a helmet. This is a very basic infographic of what a kabuto is, but there are several ways to create a kabuto and very different styles. So 3 main parts: the shikoro, which are the protectors of the neck, the helmet, and then the mask. No, in this case, the scanning team was only able to scan the helmet and the shikoro as a whole, and then the mask isolated separately. As we can see, it was a very difficult object to scan because it has the 2 main elements that are basically the enemy of scanning, which are shiny surfaces and a very dark color. In these 2 pictures, I think they were taken with a polarizing lens, so we can see even more detail than what we can see with the real object. And we can actually check the conditions that the object survived the fire. No, so in this picture we can see some remains of the lacquer. Maybe here we are not very sure still at this point how we were gonna create the color, what were the references, or even the production method. But what we could see is that the kabuto changed a lot since the fire. Because something very curious is that the structure of what remained of the kabuto doesn't actually match what we see on the pictures or what we can read on the chronicles. No, so there was something missing here that we later discovered. No, and this is more close to what we can perceive from the kabuto right now. This very dark color, and from this point, while scanning, it's also important to conceive the original artisan method they used to create pieces like this. I think this was I'm gonna be very repetitive with this concept of translating data to something, to a language that we can that we can show, that we can actually produce physically, and that we can learn from, no? So here we see the different parts and a glimpse of the level of manufacturing of this piece. No, it was created with a very antique method called hachi, which is hammering very thin iron layers onto a wood mold very, very carefully. So it was very delicate. It was exquisite, the design and the manufacturing. And that's what I mean with translating, that we are not able to replicate this artisan method, but we have to translate that visual language to something that we can actually do. No? And it's important also to, in advance, know how we are going to treat the data to get to the point that we want to. No? So it's important to know what we have, where we want to go, and what do we need to get to that point. No? So it was also important to pay attention to those details. It was a very soft at the beginning when it was created. It was a very soft surface that were lost in the fire, and also when we scan it and when we process the data, this is very important. Not only the processing of the data, but to keep the pictures, more than 3,000 pictures that were taken at the highest resolution possible, so that in the future, different techniques of processing the data it can be useful, and what is important is to maintain the quality of the root of the source of the material. No, so in this case, since the surface was so complicated to scan, we got a very noisy object, but with the basics of the geometry. No, photogrammetry. The outcome of photogrammetry is always closed objects. No, I will try not to be too technical, but um, since it was impossible to scan the inside, that data was let's say lost, and those big polygons that you see down there were created by the process, no, created with reality capture, the software that we use. So that means that again, we will have to translate what we see on the pictures and what is on the object to the digital world and to the digital language. No, so first step is checking the result of the processing, and as we can see, it's noisy. So we will have to again interpret the real object and to remove this is the mask scanned isolated. So we can see here some glimpse of the, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but
Yes.
in some areas, the remains of the burnt lacquer, especially on the inside, uh, gave us some hints of how thick actually the original was, and how thick we could go, and how thick we could design the pieces. No, so first step is analyzing the data and deciding actually what we are going to do with the data and how we are going to get to the point that we want to get. No, a lot of details were lost, like on the pin, for example, but the language was there, the history was there. No, so first step is analyzing the data and deciding, and the second step is starting to treat the digital information that we have as we are going to treat the real object, and again making that translation. No, so we have to split every element that is split on the real object, and start to treat every element isolated, let's say. So in here, every red surface that you see is the opposite surface of the gray area, meaning that the digital data at this point was a surface, was not a volume. The volume we had to create it, and that is a decision that we have to take, respecting as much as possible the original piece, and not only in this case, in this very particular case, the original piece that we scanned, but the original piece that was gifted to Philip II, because they are the same object, but the appearance is very different. No, so we treat each piece separately, and we need to what we say is cleaning the surface. No, third step is going to ZBrush. It's a software that we always use to do this kind of processes and also to sculpt. And this is where we want to go, basically, with the object that is on the Royal Armory. Again, not the one that was gifted to Philip II, because what we do in ZBrush is treating what we call the hard elements. Later on in the workshop, they create what we call the soft elements that are the most characteristic ones in this object. No, this is what I mean. This is the object that is on the Royal Armory, and this is where we want to go. You see the difference, no? The wrinkles on the forehead, the eyes, and also the helmet seems to be different. Those steps were not on the pictures taken by Laurent or in the drawings or even on the chronicles. No, so something happened here that we had to discuss and we had to make hypotheses about, and that gave us the idea that this is a very unique piece, because we don't have a reference of a kabuto done like the one we see here. No, so several options for the eyes. These are two different versions, and it was also very important to remove as much as possible the style of the person that was sculpting. The wrinkles and let's go back again, and the smoothness of the helmet was created originally with the lacquer. This was modeled with the lacquer. That's why we see the structure, the metal structure, so rough and so different from the pictures, because the artisan in the 16th century created some elements with the lacquer, and that's something that we don't have actually another reference of this happening in kabutos specifically. So this is another decision taken when it comes to the production process of how do we create this, what is gonna get the, let's say, less contemporary style, and how is it gonna be more accurate. It's not about making a beautiful piece or a showable piece, it's about making it correct. So we decided to add those details on the hard element so that we can be more academic, let's say. No, we had to also remodel the pin based on what we could see on the scan and also on the pictures, and to recreate for example, perforations. The perforations, especially on the helmet and below under the eyes, again, were not visible on the pictures taken on the late 19th century, but they are there on the structure that the Royal Armoury has. So again, a lot of hypotheses of why, trying to understand the piece, trying to understand the manufacturing process, and having in mind, again, that this is a very unique piece that we are not gonna get any other reference from any museum. So we still have some some dilemmas, let's say, on the piece, or on some secrets like the rivets that we see on the lips. We know that that held at some point maybe a leather layer on the inside of the mask, um, or maybe not. This is something that we discussed a lot. What do we do with this type of elements? No, and this is where we end up. This type of surfaces, and this is the scan, how the scan came to us, and this is the work that we had to do. Again, the manufacturing process that we were meant to do was not identical to the original one. So again, we have to translate what that Hachi method uh, um, means, and how that creates the piece. For example, the edges. Uh, the iron sheets were rolled on the edges, not to harm the soldier or whoever that wore the mask. And we are gonna make the manufacturing process without needing that element, but we have to replicate it. So we have to make that translation between what we know the process was about to the process that is gonna create our piece. Again, how we treated the model, and how the Hashi method created so soft surfaces, very continuous surfaces. Is not only about studying the object, but to know how it was made and what that artisan delivered to the surface. No, if you hammer thin layers of iron, you get um, hard edges. Doesn't matter how the real piece was left to us, but we know that the method behaves like that. So we have to replicate that. Again, we have to make the translation through the object. No, those hard edges that you see on the cheek, for example, we had to increase it a lot because we studied how it was made, so it has to be there. It has to be there, and then we start to to approach the physical production node. So and also the color checking. No, at this point, we always print some samples. This is another translation, how digital data behaves on the real world, because on those processes, some information gets lost because of the limitations of the machinery, for example, the 3D printer or the resolution of the printer. No, so what is the result that we want to get? A right digital model and also a right physical model, and they behave differently. So maybe I have a right digital model, but when I print it or when I produce it, some information is lost, and it has to be there still. So sometimes we have to tweak or cheat, let's say, in order to create a physical right model to behave like the digital one. For example, it was very useful for the edges, because when printing, the sharpness reduces a lot. And only for the physical model, we had to increase the sharpness of some details, no? And the samples and the tests are very useful always, no? So at this time, the research that Alvaro did and the Factum team did was very important, because again, we were kind of lost on how was this made, how unique this piece is. There is no other mask with this type of, for example, wrinkles. Eyes are very weird and rare in Kabutos also, and this one had it in a very unique way. So we relied on some elements that were useful for the production, like, for example, in this case, the eyebrows. No, this was the way that they created volumes and wrinkles on some armors, but it was not our case, because our case was not molded on the structure but on the lacquer. So that increased a lot the feeling that we were working with a very excellent beast. And also for the color, we relied on some samples, but what was more useful were these two pictures and the mask that Alvaro spoke about before, gifted to Philip III. We were not trying this. This was very important to acknowledge, that we were not trying to replicate what we see on the pictures, because what we see in the pictures uh, um, is from the 19th century, and they were a guide, no? But also this piece was not taken care of properly during those 300 years. It was non-understood, basically. So our hypothesis is that a lot of details, like the hair, for example, lost on that process, and it was not an understood piece. Actually, the sword that we see here is Moctezuma's, a culture on the 16th century that doesn't have anything to do with Japan at that time. The shield is Turkish, so they did a mix when exhibiting this armor, because they didn't understood anything, and it didn't have a historical value or even a decorative value, no? So when the hard elements were designed, we run tests of thicknesses, and again to link this translation that I'm talking about between digital data and the real data. Now, this is the last step before approaching to the physical reconstruction, no? And this was needed in order to print the helmet, the hard elements, in stainless steel in a process that is called selective laser sintering, which is printing in a mixed powder that is from 95 to 99% stainless steel powder, and from 5 to 1% of resin. And when it sinterizes with a laser, the resin evaporates, and it only remains the stainless steel. No, so to have definition and in order to be as most accurate as possible, we needed to give it certain thickness. No, this might be seen as corrupting the facsimile status, no, because maybe it was not this thick, but in order to again make this translation between digital world to physical world, we need to do this, no? So this is what we received, and it's a very rough material, no, that we had to touch a lot and to paint a lot in a very, let's say, academic way, no? So we didn't want to make any further assumption or any wrong assumption or very risky one. So Alvaro suggested to use the back of the mask of Philip III to recreate the color, because it was the only and the closest reference that we had, no? So again, this was I think a right decision to do, but always having in mind the real object, always having as a reference the real object, no, and also the feeling and the language that the Kabuto in the 16th century might have had, no. This was, I would say, risky to assume how the head and how the hair was done. What was it? Because the chronicles and the descriptions were saying something a bit confusing depending on which you read. This is something that Alvaro did for us perfectly, which is translating, even if it's on the same language, translating what these people meant, because somebody from the 16th century or from the 18th century might refer to the same object as me, but describing it in a very different way depending on their culture and what they have reached to, no? So we are not saying that they might have been wrong describing it, but they did it on their way. So translating again that information was crucial to us to make decisions, no? So the pictures taken by Lauren said one thing, the chronicles said something that might not match with the pictures, but we relied, I think, more on the descriptions and the chronicles rather than on the pictures, because again, the most realistic image we have of the Kabuto is the picture by Laurent, but we are not trying to replicate the helmet, how it was in the late 19th century, but in the 16th century. So it was a process of pattern making, a lot of tests on the workshop, and what we were more concerned about was the Japanese feeling and not falling into presentism. No, again, trying not to make something that is beautiful for a museum or impressive, but something that is right and something that is correct. And that led a lot of decisions that we took, like for example the laces. No, the chronicles described the laces in a certain way, and even if it was not the most, let's say, beautiful or showable pattern for us, this is what it is. So we have to recreate it, and also the elements, the soft elements. No, this was a very interesting conversation that we had with Alvaro. Even this was a very holistic project, because we even had to have in consideration the weather in Madrid, and we had this hypothesis that I didn't align at first with, of the length of the hair and the nature of the hair, because apparently Madrid is a very dry weather, and every piece in, well, not every piece, but a lot of pieces in the museums here in Madrid that are antique, let's say, made out of leather and hair, they are mostly, I would say, broken, no? Because such a dry weather is very harmful for this type of materials, no? So again, another, I would say, academical approach is considering even that very crucial element that we didn't pay attention to, which is the conditions that the Kabuto was suffering from all those centuries and all those years, no? We end up with something that I think is very close to what Philip the Second received, and we actually understand why it was misunderstood, because something gifted to the almost emperor of well, Philip II, very in a very Catholic environment, no, something like this is so impactful that might have been seen, as Alvaro suggested, as a demon, no? So that is why it couldn't share space with the type of art and manufacturing that was being produced in Spain or in Europe in those centuries, no? But what we pursued all the time was trying to get the Japanese language of that century, trying not to fall into cliches and trying not to fall into presentism or what we think is more aesthetical, no? But to be as more precise and accurate as we can. And this is what we made it for preserving cultural heritage. We also think that this type of projects doesn't happen very often because they are, I would say, risky, you know. But this academical approach um, on an entertainment environment, we think is very, very. I mean, we hope that this type of project happens more often because through copying an element, through copying an object that belongs to cultural heritage, we end up knowing even more. We end up suggesting and imagining way more that if we don't know that exists. And there are so many secrets from these objects that we don't pay attention to, like the manufacturing process or how it was made, what for, what was the feeling, what was the purpose, that if we don't imagine and if we don't create our own versions, because it's almost impossible to create something that is not there anymore, to recreate it. This is our hypothesis. Through imagining, we end up knowing even more about our history. So again, thank you, Alvaro, and we hope that this type of way of spreading knowledge, even on this niche, which is entertainment, happened way more often, no?
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Thank you very much, Alvaro, for the very interesting presentation. I found it personally very touching, imagining this person or these people trying to describe this, let's say, demon and on paper, and now thinking us reconstructing it and, well, and rediscovering it. Very, of course, I find it a very important process, and this last slide explains also shows the final, well, the second final output, because as mentioned before, the physical output for exhibition in like a traditional context, like the Royal Armoury, but with this big research behind, and, well, expressing even more content and context, and the digital tool to discover the object all over the world. So the dissemination of this artifact is, for sure, is large. And I see there are a couple of questions. We'll try to be quick since it's past 5. How long did the project take in total?
I think 7 months, Eduardo.
Yeah.
From the very beginning.
It started in August. No, the scanning process was in August, and we delivered in December. No, in January. No,
February.
In February. There was an impasse of 1 or 1 month and a half. But yeah, it was something close to 6 months. A lot of processes. Most of the time, we were actually studying and doing research, not only treating with the piece, but also knowing how we were gonna treat the piece, and discussing a lot. That was a very big part of the process, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to say that we have been helped by the Stiber collection from Florence in Italy, because they have a very good collection in Japanese armor. And Ricardo Franzi, the curator, he was very helpful for us because we have thousands of doubts, million of doubts. How is it work? How it works? Which is the right color, etc. No, and in this sense, Ricardo has helped out a lot. No, and I would like to thank his collaboration. No?
Another good example of cross collaboration among different collections and institutions, which is always comforting and necessary in research. And now we have this page open. And Alvaro, did you also take part in the part of the description of the Kabuto in the cultural discovery feature for the video games?
No, not on the video games. Well, I would like to well, it is the same because if this project could, I don't know, begin 2 years before or something like that, we could have the opportunity, no, to think about another treatment. But in any case, we are absolutely happy to have the Kabuto at the codex of the video game, no, which is very, very important to spread culture, and this is a very incredible experience, no? Not only for the museum, for all the people, no? And for us, it has been amazing to work in this way. We have never done anything similar before, and I think this is the way that we should do it. We should work in the museums using this kind of technology and etc. No? And at the same time, it is very important because you are reaching a lot of people that more probably will never visit your museum or will never appreciate this kind of artifact. No?
That's a goal, and then everybody would be very happy to continue on this route. And I feel that this is the future and the way to go for collections in general. Well, I would like to chat and ask even more questions, but I think that the time is up. And anyway, you have been very clear. And so everything was really fascinating. First part, second part of today's discussion really matched very well. And I was very honored and happy to hear you all. Thanks also to all people who participated. And I remind you that this presentation, and as in general, the Archive Online Academy classes and lessons and courses are recorded and are present on the Archive Venice website. Thank you also to the team of Archive and Fondazione Giorgio Cini. So thank you again and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.